Hello and welcome to the channel. And so far, if you've been following along with our previous videos, this is a web series on learning Java programming. And so far what we've done is we've just set up our Java JDK, our development kit. We've set up a NetBeans IDE, or a place where we can program in Java. And now it's time to get into the actual building blocks of the programming language itself. We've talked about the entry point, which is the public static void main method where your program starts. And when we get further into this now, every program in Java needs to hold on to values, or it needs to hold data in order to do something with that data. And whether that be just take two numbers and add it together, or multiply it together, or take a simple sentence that we've written or a user's given us to write, it needs to hold it somewhere. And that place is a variable. We use variables to store data. And there's several different types of variables that we can use to store certain types of data. And that's what we get into here, is the numeric data types. And this is going to be numbers. It's going to be based on numbers. At first we'll work with integers, only whole numbers with no decimal points. We will get into more decimal points or floating point numbers as well. But for now we're going to keep it simple. We're going to work through this slow. And we're going to start talking about the very first type of data type, or very first type of variable that we can use in storing values to use later on in our program. And it's key to know what each data type is and how it and what it has to offer us. So in this first one here, we'll explain the byte data type. And in order to do this, we'll declare a variable. So declaring a variable is fairly simplistic to do. Very first thing you need to do is you need to know the data type, or the variable name that you're using. In this case, it's a byte. So we'll just start off by typing in BYTE, and that's going to be the data type that we're using. After this, we'll name the variable, and we'll just name it something like first underscore byte. It's very important not to leave spaces, as your program won't work. And we can assign a value to this by putting the equal sign, and we'll just put in here -128 followed by a semicolon. We'll set up another one, byte second underscore byte. We'll make this one equal to +127. And the reason we did this here is because there's a range that the byte value has available to it. And if you notice, well, first let's comment. We'll just comment this out. The byte is an 8-bit signed value, or signed data type, and signed only means that it has a negative value and a positive value. And when we work with signed, just know that it has a negative value, which is the -128, and a positive value up to 127. If this was an unsigned data type, it would work from 0 to the maximum range, like 255. But for this, it's an 8-bit signed, so that's what you need to know. So the range is kind of important in choosing the proper data type to use. You can see here, if I change this to 129, we get an error, and it throws an error of incompatible type, possible lossy conversion to a type of integer. So we'll have to leave that at 128. And the same goes for the positive range. If we go to 128 down here, it gives us that exact same error. Now, when picking a data type, it's really important to know the value that you're going to store in it. And that's helpful because you'll have what's called an overflow or an underflow if you use the improper one, and your data results won't come back with the required outcome, or with a desired outcome that you were looking to do. So we'll just type here that this is our lowest range for the byte data type, as being our negative range, the lowest number we can get. And we'll type in here, this is our highest range, or the highest number. Now typically you don't have to assign these values. I'm just doing this to show you the the range differences when it comes to choosing. And it's important to know the values that you're storing in your data types, because if you don't, you'll come in with some very undesired outcomes, and you'll have errors and issues that you won't be able to actually resolve when it comes down to troubleshooting your code at a later time. So the byte would be used typically for like someone's age. You know, someone's age wouldn't come up to 127. The numbers, you got to stay within these smaller numbers here. You know, the days of the month would probably fall within a byte range. And the reason that you pick these different smaller ranges, and you know, why wouldn't we pick a number, just a generic big amount of data, or like pick a generic data type that would just encompass billions of numbers? Well, it all comes down to the RAM available inside the device as well, and the memory available inside the device. And it used to be a big problem with the older devices that would have very minimal amounts of RAM. The hardware was very limited to what it could do, so we would have to reuse flush data types, reuse variables, a lot of tricky stuff. Today's day, it's not so important, but it would still, if you do get into certain app development for phones, maybe there might be phones that have very little or very minimal hardware. So just knowing your data types to use will help you to minimize the overall size of your application. So that's it for this video. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If there's any questions or comments that you'd like to ask or have answered, just leave them in the comment section below. I do hope you subscribe and check out the rest of the videos we do have, and we'll catch you in the next video. Thank you so very much.